The silence in the dining room became so heavy that the clinking of ice inside my glass sounded like thunder. My sister-in-law offered a sharp scoff and declared that since I had no family of my own, caring for her kids was simply good practice. Right then, something snapped inside me. I did not scream or cry. I pulled my strap over my shoulder, ignored their expectant eyes, and walked out into the cool night. Understanding that sudden exit requires knowing how my relatives viewed my entire life as endless extra storage space. My brother Brandon and his wife Jessica relied heavily on my mother Teresa to coordinate their chaotic schedules, while my father Howard remained totally passive. They had 4 young children named Haley, Tyler, Sadie, and little Toby. I loved those children deeply, yet my family converted that affection into a weapon against my personal freedom. Whenever a child got sick during my work deadlines, they expected me to abandon everything to help. When daycare closed unexpectedly, my brother left children on my doorstep as if my time was worthless. Pushing back only made them paint me as heartless, while submitting to their demands was called basic family devotion. So when Brandon proudly announced baby number 5 at the weekend gathering, my heart sank under the impending burden. My phone vibrated endlessly during the drive back to my apartment, filled with guilt trips from my mother and accusations from my brother. I muted every notification and went straight to sleep. The next morning I met my trusted friend Vance at a small local cafe. Vance was the only person who respected my boundaries. I described the dinner, the insulting comments, and the overwhelming expectation that I should sacrifice my future. Vance listened quietly before pointing out that my relatives were no longer asking for help, but asserting total ownership over my existence. Moments later, a demanding text from my mother ordered me to report to her house immediately to fix my attitude. Vance advised me to stay away, warning that toxic family members seek surrender rather than honest conversation. Still, a quiet hope urged me to try explaining my boundaries face to face. Stepping into my parents' living room felt like walking into a trap. My mother stirred jug iced tea with an eerie calm, while Brandon sat at the table scrolling his phone with indifference. Jessica leaned against the counter, displaying red eyes that suggested performative tears. Howard stood silently near the back window. My mother gently claimed they only wanted me to be cooperative, but I immediately countered that she was demanding submission, not cooperation. Brandon snapped that nobody expected me to raise his children forever, while Jessica added that helping during pregnancy and the first year was minimal effort. I reminded them that taking care of 4 kids for an entire year was a massive commitment. My mother sighed heavily and noted that since I worked remotely, lived alone, and lacked a husband, my schedule was open. That statement proved they viewed my life as entirely empty. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered and heard a calm voice identify himself as Sergeant Miller from the local community center. He asked if I was aware that 3 small children had been left unattended at the center under my name. I locked eyes with my brother as his face drained of color. The officer explained that a handwritten note claimed I had agreed to supervise them. The realization hit me instantly. My family had not merely assumed I would help, but had constructed a trap where refusal made me look negligent. I told Sergeant Miller I was heading there immediately, but explicitly clarified that I had never agreed to take custody of those children. The officer noted my statement clearly. I turned toward the door, leaving my family in stunned silence as panic finally began to break through their arrogant facade. Brandon chased me out to my car, muttering warnings about involving authorities in family business. I turned around and asked why he had left his own children with total strangers using a fake agreement. He stared without answering, his mouth working silently. I got into my vehicle and drove toward the community center, feeling a mixture of anxiety and absolute clarity. The years of quiet compliance were officially over. Inside the facility activity room, 8-year-old Haley sat frozen with her arms crossed, while 6-year-old Tyler stared blankly at a puzzle board. 4-year-old Sadie clutched a small plush toy. Toddler Toby was not there, having been kept home. Haley gasped my name when I walked in. I knelt beside her, promising that they were safe, while reassuring Tyler that none of the kids were in any trouble at all. Sergeant Miller handed me a clear plastic folder containing the note left with the desk clerk. The handwriting clearly belonged to my mother, stating I was taking full responsibility for the children while the parents prepared for the new baby. Reading that document made my skin crawl. I showed the officer my phone records, including the previous text messages showing my firm refusal to babysit. The officer confirmed I had zero obligation to take them. Minutes later, Brandon and Jessica rushed into the building with furious expressions, followed closely by my mother who was trying to maintain her polished appearance. Howard watched through the glass entrance doors from the parking lot, maintaining his distance. Sergeant Miller led everyone into a private room to address the situation. Brandon immediately tried to wave it off as a simple domestic misunderstanding, but the officer pointedly held up the official evidence file. Jessica blurted out that the kids were fine because I was scheduled to collect them anyway. I spoke up firmly, stating directly that I had never agreed to care for them or show up at the center. My mother glared at me, saying this was not the time to be stubborn. It was unbelievable that after leaving children stranded, my relatives still viewed my personal boundary as the central crisis of the entire day. Sergeant Miller asked directly who wrote the letter. My mother admitted she wrote it, claiming I always helped and the children were comfortable with me. The officer asked if I had given explicit permission for that arrangement, forcing my mother into an uncomfortable silence. Brandon erupted, shouting that I was bitter and jealous because I had built nothing while he had a full family. His outburst only cemented the official report taking place. I looked at the officer and formally requested that my name be permanently removed from all emergency contacts, caregiving lists, and authorized pickup files for my brother family. Brandon laughed bitterly, calling me cold and heartless. In response, I opened my phone and read their manipulative, abusive text messages aloud to the entire room. My mother turned completely pale as the officer documented every word, warning them about potential child protection referrals. After Brandon and Jessica were forced to sign formal release paperwork to regain custody of their children, I gave Haley, Tyler, and Sadie tight hugs and assured them of my love. Out in the parking lot, my father finally stepped forward to scold me for taking things too far. I looked him in the eyes and replied that I had simply stopped carrying their negligence, then drove away into the afternoon sun. I did not engage in petty arguments. I posted a single high-resolution photograph of my mother's signed note resting inside the police evidence sleeve directly into the group chat. The conversation froze completely for 11 minutes as decades of manipulative narratives dissolved under undeniable proof. Reclaiming my life cost me my relationship with my toxic relatives, but standard family peace is worthless when it requires sacrificing your own self-respect and identity.